It's a great day to be alive. Don't tell me otherwise. How are you doing, beat builder? Are you building those beats? Are you making the best you can? Well, this rule is going to be mostly for people new to music production. But even if you're a veteran in the game, I think this advice is still good. You need to create more than you consume. It's so easy to consume different things in this day of social media, YouTube. Hey, I fall prey to it myself. Sometimes if I'm unmotivated, I just be scrolling different things, and YouTube is good. They'll give me a lot of things that I want to see and think I can help. So I want you to create more. That's how you get better at your craft. I think we get stuck in trying to watch these tutorials of how to do this and that. Think about this. You go online and you have a question in your head. Your piece of equipment stopped working. So you're trying to figure out why it stopped. So you go on the forums, you go on to YouTube, but when you get to YouTube, you see all these things. This video right here, it might answer your question, but these two videos on the side and on the bottom, it might say the ultimate way to get compression. This next one might say, this plugin is what change the way you make music. Except, you know how titles go. I'm guilty of it sometimes. To get people to get engaged and click, you got to make those titles. And we all know sometimes these words, they have a lot of meaning, but the videos don't do that much. It's just a way that we have to do it as content creators on YouTube. So you found your problem and you found the answer to it, how to fix your hardware. But remember, in your back of your head, you saw that ultimate compression video. So especially as a newbie, you thinking, well, compression, mate, it may make my stuff sound better because that's what everybody else been saying. So you click it. Now, what you were working on, now you're focused on a new goal, compression. You might not even be ready to use a compressor yet, but because you saw that video, now it's at least in your head. It's in the zeitgeist of the air. So it's in the back of your mind. And what you're not doing is focusing on how to make your music better in general and get better at your craft. That's why I say you need to create more than you consume. From at least my perspective, how I started, I think I had a good grasp on this create more than consume when I first started. I know it's a different time. So I started making music 20 years ago. Social media, YouTube, this stuff wasn't even invented yet. So in high school, we had a class called Recording Lab where I learned how to make music. So if I didn't know how to do something, one, I had to figure it out myself. Right? We didn't have internet in the school. I had to figure it out myself. Ask someone next to me who may or may not know how to fix that problem, or ask the teacher. So that's only three options, and those are the only options I can see in the scope of my class. Right? It would have been different if I had the computer at that time and I can go and find my answer, and I would see all these different answers to other problems, just like into current day. But because I had that advantage, see, I see that as an advantage, not having that much information available, because I had to figure out stuff on my own. I would experiment more. I learned the basics. When I had my first machine, it didn't even have effects. And I didn't know effects was a thing. Right? Like, that's funny to say. In this day and age, most DAWs, most new hardware, they come with effects. This machine I had no effects. It didn't have reverb. It didn't have compression. You couldn't even pan. You could pan. You can pan. I'm gonna take that back. You can pan. But I didn't know what panning was. Let's put it that way. You could pan. I didn't know what moving the stuff left and right even meant. It didn't have echo. It didn't have delay. It didn't have a flanger. It didn't have all these crazy new effects plugins that you can get. So I didn't realize at the time, though, I was learning the skill of making beats. I learned how to make a good beat without the effects. I learned how to sequence without all the effects. I learned how to mix and pick the right sounds without all the effects, like a compressor, right? Or reverb to separate it. I had to figure out in my head how do I make this sound nice and full without all these effects? Because like I said, I didn't know what effects were. No one, even in the class either, knew what effects were. The teachers didn't. Teacher just said, learn this machine, here's the lesson, you do what it is, and then you get a grade. So I didn't learn how to even use reverb until like 10 years after making music, after I got a Motif keyboard. And what I would do on that Motif, by default, they had some reverb on there. I would turn reverb off on every single instrument. So if you hear some of my older beats, I never used reverb, even though it was on there. I barely used the effects that they had on that Motif. They had some, but I didn't use them because I never learned what effects could do to help my productions. And then, so after that 10 years, I built a solid foundation. I understood the basics. Now, I can start experimenting. Once I get a DAW, using Pro Tools and Logic, I'm like, what does compressor mean? What does pan mean? What does echo mean? All these different things. I'm like, oh, I get it now. I'm able to create better space with reverb. I'm able to control levels of audio with compressor. I'm able to make things move around in the mix with panning, with echo, with delay. See how that works? So all that time, I didn't know I was disadvantaged, but I actually had an advantage that I understood the basics of music. Whereas someone new into music production, you're so bombarded with so many things. Say you get your first DAW. Say you get Fruity Loops. You don't know how to use it. You go on, type in how to use Fruity Loops. And like I said, though, you're going to get all this other stuff connected to Fruity Loops. How to make my 808s harder. How to make them slap like Metro Boomin. All these different things to get you, in the subconscious back of your mind to get you to click. And you're just going to keep clicking. You're going to click on that, how to get your 808 kicks to slap. Why do you need them to slap? Do you even know why they need to slap? Do you know the fundamentals of a 808 kick drum? You don't even understand that. You're just doing what someone tells you that you think is the right way. Now, nothing is wrong with that, but then you get stuck in, this is how they created their sound, and you're going to do the same thing. And eventually, you're probably not going to experiment with different things because these videos mostly tell you there's a right way to do something, when in actuality, there is no right way. It just depends on what it is and what you think is creative to your process. So I want to get you unstuck in that process. Yes, it's good to learn how to use these things. Nothing wrong with learning how to use these things. But you're going to get stuck. And that's where we don't get the creativity of, you hear music now, especially in mainstream music, it sounds kind of the same. Why? Everybody's using the same plugins. Everybody's using the same drum loops, drum sounds, the same techniques. No one is experimenting. Maybe I should do this instead of that. Right? There is no right or wrong. It's just, if it sounds good, it sounds good. So I don't want you to get caught up in that trap. At the end of the day, you need to be creating more than you consume. And then once you get better and better at music, you might not even need to create that much. You understand the process. You're making good music. You can move faster. I know when I first started, I used to create all the time, and I rarely consumed stuff. Like, I was just so focused on making things, experimenting, trying to do different things. And social media wasn't a big thing. There was no YouTube. So there was nothing actually to really distract me anyway, to be honest. I mean, they had magazines and stuff, but I didn't really have magazine subscriptions. I would read them, maybe see things. I couldn't afford it anyway, so I couldn't buy it. So I had an advantage, even though if you look from the top down, it would have maybe looked like I had a disadvantage because I didn't know all this stuff. But sometimes not knowing things makes you experiment and do different things. So let me know in the comments, do you create more than you consume? Or do you consume more than you create? And I'm not trying to rag on you. If you consume a lot and addicted to YouTube or social media, hey, it is what it is. Typing it out loud might help you rethink your mind and say, hey, maybe I need to step back. I know I do that for myself, even though I'm not looking necessarily for music tips or stuff like that. It's just other things I'm interested in too on YouTube, and I end up just watching it. And I'm like, why am I watching this so much? I could be doing other things. I could be creating other things and doing things I want to do. So let me know, are you a creator or are you a consumer?